Dear listener, welcome once more to the Hercule Poirot Story Podcast, where the little grey cells awaken to unravel the most perplexing enigmas of the human soul. Tonight, we embark upon a tale of frost-bound treachery, Hercule Poirot and the frozen Manor murder. Picture, if you will, the remote grandeur of Blackwood Manor, nestled amidst the snow-swept moors of the Scottish Highlands in the year 1927, a bastion of stone and secrets, isolated by blizzards that howl like vengeful spirits. The air is crisp with impending doom, the ground a crystalline shroud that conceals both footprints and falsehoods. As the winds whisper of betrayal, we invite you to don your warmest cloak, pour a steaming cup of tea, and join us in this auditory odyssey. Should the mystery intrigue you, dear sleuth, share your deductions in the comments below or on our social channels. Now, let the curtain rise on deception most foul. Chapter 1. The Gathering Storm. The snow fell upon Harrington Manor with the relentless persistence of a besieging army, each flake a tiny warrior in the vast white host that sought to conquer the landscape. It was the 15th day of December in the year 1932, and the manor, a stately edifice of Jacobean design, stood defiant amid the rolling hills of rural Yorkshire. Its time-worn stone walls, etched with the patina of centuries, were now encrusted in a layer of frost that glittered under the fading light of the winter sun. The mullioned windows, like watchful eyes, reflected the swirling chaos without, while within, the warmth of roaring fires and the glow of gas lamps created an illusion of sanctuary. The wind howled through the chimneys, a mournful dirge that echoed the isolation of the place. The narrow drive leading to the manor was buried under drifts, rendering escape or arrival an impossibility. In this frozen seclusion, the seeds of tragedy were sown, unbeknownst to the inhabitants who moved about their affairs with the complacency of those oblivious to impending doom. Hercule Poirot, the celebrated detective from Belgium, had been summoned to this remote haven by none other than Lord Archibald Harrington himself. The invitation had arrived via telegram, couched in terms of a private consultation on a matter of delicacy, though Poirot suspected deeper waters lay beneath the surface. Poirot was a man of singular appearance, diminutive in height, with an egg-shaped head crowned by a meticulously groomed thatch of black hair, and moustaches waxed to perfection, curling upwards like the horns of a vigilant bull. His eyes, a vivid green, possessed an intensity that could unravel the most guarded of souls. It was not merely his physical observations that set him apart, but his profound insight into the human psyche, the intricate web of motives, fears, and desires that drove men and women to extremes. Poirot believed that every action left an imprint on the mind, a psychological footprint as telling as any mark in the mud. The great hall of Harrington Manor was the heart of the estate, a cavernous space panelled in dark oak and adorned with ancestral portraits whose stern gazes seemed to judge the living. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, its flames leaping hungrily at the logs, casting flickering shadows that played across the assembled guests like phantoms in a Gothic tale. Lord Archibald Harrington, the master of this domain, held court from a high-backed chair, his presence commanding respect, if not affection. At 58 years, he was a figure of robust vitality, with broad shoulders straining against his tailored evening coat, a chest like a barrel, and a face marked by the deep lines of authority and indulgence. His hair, streaked with grey, framed a brow perpetually furrowed in contemplation of his vast industrial empire. Mines and mills that spanned the globe, forging wealth from the earth's bowels. Yet, For all his outward strength, Harrington harboured a secret frailty, a heart taxed by years of excess, its beats irregular and foreboding. Psychologically, he was a colossus of self-assurance, driven by an unquenchable thirst for power and legacy, often blind to the resentments he cultivated in those around him. By his side sat Lady Evelyn Harrington, his consort of 20 years, a woman whose beauty retained the allure of her youth despite the passage of time. Slender and graceful, she was attired in a gown of shimmering emerald silk that accentuated her lithe form, her raven hair coiled into an elegant chignon that revealed the swan-like curve of her neck. Her features were finely chiselled, high cheekbones, lips of a natural rose hue, and eyes of a stormy grey that held depths of unspoken emotion. Married not for passion but for the stability of Harrington's fortune, Lady Evelyn's mind was a chamber of quiet rebellion. She chafed against the constraints of her role, her psyche a blend of refined poise and simmering discontent, yearning for freedoms denied by societal bonds and her husband's domineering nature. Her glances across the room carried a subtle calculation, as if weighing the chains that bound her. Leaning against the mantel with affected nonchalance was their son, Victor Harrington, a young man of 25 whose life of privilege had bred dissipation rather than virtue. His auburn hair fell in dishevelled waves across a forehead creased with petulance, his thin lips curled in a habitual sneer, and his eyes, a pale blue, darted with the unease of one perpetually scheming. Dressed in the height of fashion, his athletic build was softened by nights spent in gambling halls and illicit rendezvous. Victor's psychological makeup was one of entitled desperation. His father's threats to curtail his allowance had ignited a fire of resentment, transforming filial duty into a cauldron of potential malice. He viewed inheritance not as a gift, but as a right, his mind twisted by the fear of dispossession. Miss Elena Voss, the Lord's devoted secretary, entered the hall bearing a portfolio of documents, her steps measured and unobtrusive. Of modest stature, with mousy brown hair secured in a neat bun, and spectacles framing wide hazel eyes, she presented an image of efficiency and reserve. Her face, though plain, held a certain delicacy in its proportions. A small nose, soft mouth, and skin pale as parchment. Clad in a simple grey frock, Miss Voss concealed beneath her demure exterior a tempest of emotion. An unrequited affection for her employer, nurtured in the quiet hours of their collaboration, had evolved into a poignant torment. Rejected with polite indifference, her psyche bore the scars of humiliation, her motives shrouded in the veil of unwavering loyalty. Dr. Reginald Thorne, the family physician, ambled in with a genial air, his portly frame straining the buttons of his waistcoat, his balding head shining under the light, and his spectacles perched precariously on a ruddy nose. His cheeks, flushed from a predilection for fine port, quivered with each chuckle. Broad-handed and affable, Thorne's outward joviality masked a psyche fraught with anxiety. A grave error in his past, a surgical mishap that ended in tragedy, had rendered him susceptible to extortion, his ethical boundaries eroded by the imperative of survival. His attendance at the Manor was routine, yet his mind churned with the weight of secrets shared and exploited. Mrs. Beatrice Lang, the housekeeper, directed the servants with brisk authority, her stout figure enveloped in crisp black attire, her iron-grey hair pulled into a severe knot that mirrored her disposition. Her round face, etched with the lines of long service, featured eyes of piercing blue that observed all with unflinching scrutiny. Loyal on the surface, Mrs. Lang nursed a deep-seated vendetta. Lord Harrington's unjust dismissal of her brother years ago had led to his downfall and death, forging in her a psychological forge of vengeance that burned slow and steady. Colonel Marcus Hale, a veteran of the Boer War and old comrade of the Lord, completed the party. Tall and grizzled, with a pronounced limp from an old wound and a moustache of impressive volume, his ruddy features and booming voice evoked tales of imperial glory. Attired in tweeds, Hale's robust exterior belied financial ruin. Debts from reckless wages, many owed to Harrington, threatened his honour. His psyche was a battlefield of pride and desperation, loyalty clashing with the urge for self-preservation. As the group proceeded to the dining room, the table resplendent with crystal and silver, the atmosphere thickened with unspoken tensions. The storm outside raged, rattling the panes, while within, polite discourse masked the brewing storm. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot," Lord Harrington boomed, lifting his goblet, "your famed grey cells must find our rustic gathering quite the puzzle." Poirot smiled enigmatically. "Indeed, my lord, the mind reveals itself in the smallest details, like tracks in the snow before the wind erases them." Lady Evelyn's laugh was brittle. "This blizzard will bury all traces, I fear. We are captives here." Victor interjected sharply. "Father, enough of this. We must speak of my affairs, alone." "Tomorrow, boy," Harrington replied curtly. Miss Voss murmured, "The ledgers show anomalies, my lord." Dr. Thorne toasted jovially, "To warmth in the cold." Mrs. Lang served with silent intensity, her eyes on Harrington like daggers. Colonel Hale grinned, "To comrades and debts paid." Post-dinner, Harrington withdrew to the conservatory, his nightcap in hand. An hour later, Mrs. Lang's scream pierced the night. The lord lay dead amid the plants, poisoned by arsenic in his brandy. Poirot declared, "Murder! The snow imprisons us and the culprit." Chapter 2. Shadows of Suspicion. The pallid light of dawn seeped through the frost-etched windows of Harrington Manor, casting a spectral glow upon the snowbound estate. The blizzard had abated not, but rather intensified during the nocturnal hours, piling drifts against the doors like barricades erected by some malevolent force. The 15th of December had yielded to the 16th, yet time seemed suspended in this wintry limbo, where the boundaries between guilt and innocence blurred like ink in water. The air within the manor hung heavy with the chill of death and the acrid residue of suspicion, each breath a reminder of the poison that had claimed Lord Archibald Harrington. The conservatory, now a chamber of horrors, remained sealed under Poirot's directive, its glass walls fogged with condensation, preserving the macabre tableau within. Hercule Poirot, ever the epitome of composure amid chaos, had risen with the first faint glimmer of light, his ablutions completed with meticulous care, moustaches waxed to razor precision, attire immaculate in its tailored elegance. He descended to the drawing-room, a spacious salon adorned with velvet draperies and Chippendale furnishings. Here, the fire had been stoked anew by a tremulous servant, its flames leaping in futile defiance of the pervasive cold. Poirot's mind, that prodigious engine of deduction, churned ceaselessly, sifting through the fragments of the previous eve. The shattered glass, the almond-tinged vapour, the contorted visage of the deceased. He perceived not merely the corporeal evidence, but the psychological undercurrents, the festering resentments, the veiled desperations that propelled human beings towards the abyss of crime. Summoning the household with a firmness that brooked no delay, Poirot assembled them in the drawing-room. The suspects, for such they now were, filed in with varying degrees of reluctance, their faces etched with the pallor of sleepless vigil. Lady Evelyn Harrington entered first, her emerald gown exchanged for a sombre black ensemble that accentuated her ethereal fragility. Her grey eyes, shadowed by fatigue, darted about the room, betraying a psyche fractured by the dual blows of bereavement and scrutiny. Was it genuine sorrow, Poirot pondered, or the artful mask of a woman liberated from matrimonial chains? Victor Harrington slouched in next, his auburn hair dishevelled, his attire rumpled as if he had wrestled with phantoms through the night. His sneer had softened into a mask of sullen defiance, yet his fingers trembled as they clutched a cigarette case. Psychologically, he was a vortex of entitlement and fear. The prospect of inheritance tantalized, but the shadow of disinheritance loomed, perhaps driving him to precipitate his father's demise. Miss Elena Voss followed, her spectacles askew upon her freckled nose, her mousy hair escaping its bun in tendrils of disarray. She clutched a handkerchief, her hazel eyes rimmed with red from weeping. Her unrequited affection for the Lord had been a silent torment. Now, in death's wake, it manifested as a psychological maelstrom of grief and guilt. Had admiration curdled into vengeance? Dr. Reginald Thorne shuffled in, his portly frame seeming diminished, his spectacles fogged with perspiration despite the chill. His ruddy cheeks had paled, and his hands fidgeted with a stethoscope dangling from his pocket. A man of science ensnared by ethical lapses, his psyche bore the weight of blackmail. Desperation might well have transformed healer into harbinger of death. Mrs. Beatrice Lang bustled forth, her stout form rigid with indignation, her severe bun unyielding as her gaze. She carried a tray of tepid tea, her blue eyes flashing with unspoken accusations. Her vendetta against the Lord was a festering wound. Psychologically, she embodied the archetype of the loyal retainer turned avenger. Her motives steeped in familial loyalty betrayed. Colonel Marcus Hale limped in last, his grizzled moustache drooping, his military bearing compromised by evident unease. His ruddy complexion had ashen undertones, and he leaned heavily on his cane. Honour-bound, yet financially ruined, his psyche wrestled with the conflict of camaraderie and creditors' demands, debts that death might conveniently erase. Poirot positioned himself before the hearth, his compact form radiating authority. "Mes amis," he intoned in his precise, accented English, "we find ourselves ensnared in a web of deceit, prisoners not only of this relentless storm, but of a murder most calculated." Lord Harrington succumbed to arsenic, administered in his brandy betwixt the hours of 10 and 11 o'clock last eve. The poison acts swiftly, convulsions, paralysis, demise. The timeline is paramount. I beseech each of you, where were you during that fateful interval? A hush descended, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the distant moan of the wind. Lady Evelyn spoke first, her voice a silken thread frayed at the edges. I retired to my chambers forthwith, after dinner. A migraine assailed me. These infernal gales exacerbate such afflictions. I sought repose alone. Poirot's emerald gaze pierced her composure. He noted the subtle tremor in her clasped hands. A psychological indicator of prevarication. Grief or the feigned sorrow of a beneficiary. Her alibi hung tenuous, unsupported by witnesses. Victor exhaled a plume of smoke, his tone laced with petulance. I sequestered myself in the billiard room, practicing shots to soothe my nerves. Father and I had quarrelled earlier. He reiterated his intent to excise me from the will. But to imply murder? Absurd! I am no parricide. His defiance masked vulnerability, yet Poirot discerned the evasion in his eyes. A red herring, perhaps, or the kernel of truth. The young man's desperation was palpable, his motive as clear as the snow outside. Miss Voss dabbed at her eyes, her voice quavering. I remained in the study, collating documents as is my wont. Lord Harrington, he was more than an employer to me. I harboured sentiments profound, though unreciprocated, yet I would never. Her confession hung in the air, a psychological revelation of love scorned. Poirot pondered. Such passion could ignite the flames of jealousy, leading to fatal reprisal. Dr. Thorne mopped his brow with a handkerchief, his jowls quivering. I attended upon the Lord briefly in his study prior to his withdrawal. His cardiac condition concerned me. I proffered a tonic, innocuous to fortify him. Thereafter, I repaired to the library for a perusal of medical tomes. Poirot's scrutiny intensified. The physician's nervousness suggested concealed knowledge. A falsified remedy as misdirection. The missing vial from his medical bag loomed in Poirot's thoughts. A physical clue demanding exploration. Mrs. Lang set down the tray with a clatter, her arms crossed defiantly. I toiled in the kitchens, preparing tisanes and overseeing the staff. That man, Lord Harrington, ruined my kin, dismissing my brother without cause, driving him to despair's end. But vengeance? I'd not soil my hands with such. Her bitterness resonated, a psychological scar unhealed by time. Poirot noted her proximity to the decanters, opportunity aligned with motive. Colonel Hale puffed on his pipe, his voice gruff. I lingered in the smoking room, reflecting on campaigns past. Owed Archie a king's ransom from our wagers, but we'd amicably resolve it. No cause for foul play. His limp appeared accentuated, perhaps a feint to obscure mobility. Poirot sensed the undercurrent of desperation, honour tarnished by debt. As interrogations proceeded, physical evidence emerged like ghosts from the ether. Poirot led a cursory examination of the conservatory, the group trailing in hushed trepidation. A scrap of emerald fabric clung to the doorframe, matching Lady Evelyn's discarded gown. Implication or implantation? Footprints etched in the thin rime of frost upon the tiled floor traced erratic paths, their size suggesting a man's boot, yet blurred by partial melting. And from Dr. Thorne's bag, a vial of tonic absent, its label hinting at arsenical compounds. Inconsistencies proliferated. Victor professed solitude, yet a billiard cue bore chalk marks inconsistent with his grip. Miss Voss's papers concealed a torn missive, fragments alluding to ardent declarations, a red herring of romantic folly. The timeline fractured further. A housemaid attested to footsteps echoing at 10:30, contradicting Lady Evelyn's seclusion. The morning waned into afternoon, suspicions coiling like serpents in the breast of each. Poirot retreated momentarily to ponder, his grey cells aligning the disparate threads. The manor entombed in snow harboured not merely bodies, but souls laid bare, each harbouring shadows that the light of truth must dispel. Yet the web tightened, red herrings abounding, as the storm without mirrored the tempest within. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Frost. The afternoon sun, a feeble orb shrouded in the perpetual haze of the blizzard's aftermath, cast elongated shadows through the frost-laced panes of Harrington Manor. The storm had relented somewhat, its furious gales diminishing to intermittent gusts that whispered secrets against the ancient stonework. Yet the snow continued to fall in desultory veils. Ensuring the estate's isolation persisted like a sentence from some inexorable tribunal. It was now the 16th of December, 1932, and the manor, once a bastion of opulent seclusion, had transformed into a sepulchre of suspicion, where every creak of floorboard and sigh of wind evoked the spectre of the departed Lord Archibald Harrington. The air within carried the faint, lingering bitterness of arsenic, a olfactory phantom that clung to the conservatory's threshold, reminding all of the poison's insidious efficacy. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the atmospheric oppression, pursued his inquiries with the relentless precision of a horologist assembling an intricate timepiece. Having gleaned preliminary alibis and motives in the morning's convocation, he now delved deeper into the labyrinth of human frailties, traversing the Manor's echoing corridors like a shadow in pursuit of light. His mind, that repository of grey cells, catalogued every nuance. The psychological fissures in each suspect's facade, the physical anomalies that bespoke deception, and the temporal discrepancies that fractured the narrative of innocence. Poirot understood that murder was seldom a solitary act, but a culmination of whispers, secrets murmured in the dark, resentments nurtured in silence, desires twisted into fatal resolve. Venturing first to the conservatory, Poirot re-examined the scene of the crime under the pallid light filtering through the glass dome. The exotic foliage, dusted with indoor frost, framed the spot where Lord Harrington had fallen, his body now removed to a makeshift bier in the cellar at Poirot's insistence, pending the Thor's permission for official inquest. The shattered brandy glass lay undisturbed, its shards glinting like malevolent diamonds, and the decanter nearby exhaled the faint almond essence of cyanide's cousin, arsenic. Poirot's keen nose detected no adulteration in the ambient air, confirming the poison's targeted administration. Kneeling with surprising agility for his compact frame, he scrutinized the tiled floor. Footprints, partially effaced by the warmth of investigating feet, revealed a mélange of sizes, delicate feminine impressions overlapping broader masculine treads. A psychological clue emerged in the erratic patterns. The killer had lingered, perhaps in gloating or remorse, betraying a mind not wholly devoid of sentiment. Rising, Poirot's gaze alighted upon a torn fragment of paper nestled amid the ferns, a charred edge suggesting hasty incineration. Retrieving it with tweezers from his pocket case, he deciphered faded script. "Your indiscretion shall cost." A missive of blackmail, perhaps. This physical evidence dovetailed with whispers of Lord Harrington's manipulative proclivities, hinting at motives manifold. Departing the conservatory, Poirot sought private audiences, commencing with Lady Evelyn in her boudoir, a chamber of silken draperies and ormolu accents that belied the chill pervading the manor. She reclined upon a chaise longue, her grey eyes veiled by a lace handkerchief, her lithe form swathed in mourning weeds. "Monsieur Poirot," she murmured, her voice a silken lament, "this ordeal unravels me. Archibald's demise is so sudden, so cruel." Poirot inclined his head sympathetically, yet his emerald eyes probed her psyche's depths. "Madam, your marriage? Was it one of a felicity unalloyed?" Her hesitation was telling. A flicker of resentment crossed her features. "Ours was an alliance of convenience, monsieur." Love faded into tolerance, yet lately he suspected indiscretions. She confessed in liaison with Colonel Hale, a dalliance born of neglect, threatened by Harrington's knowledge and impending divorce. "I'd forfeit all, fortune, station." Psychologically, her poise masked desperation. Liberation via poison seemed plausible, yet her alibi held, corroborated by a maid's testimony of her seclusion. A red herring, or subtle misdirection. Next, Poirot confronted Victor in the billiard room, where cues lay abandoned like relics of frivolity. The young heir paced restlessly, his auburn locks tousled, his pale eyes evasive. "This interrogation is insufferable, Poirot. Father threatened disinheritance. My debts mount like these infernal snowdrifts. But murder? I'd not stoop so low." Poirot noted the tremor in his voice, a psychological indicator of feigned bravado. Probing further, Victor revealed a clandestine alteration to the will, witnessed in secret, stripping him of legacy. I beseeched him. Rage ensued. A gambling chit, discovered near the body, implicated him, yet Victor protested its planting. Timeline inconsistencies arose. A clock's chime placed him elsewhere at 10:40, contradicting his solitude. Resentment curdled into patricide. Poirot reserved judgment, sensing layers unpeeled. Miss Eleanor Voss awaited in the study, surrounded by ledgers that chronicled the Harrington fortunes. Her hazel eyes, magnified by spectacles, brimmed with unshed tears, her delicate hands wringing a sodden kerchief. "He was my world, monsieur." Admiration blossomed into affection, unreturned. Her confession poured forth, advances rebuffed, humiliation endured. Psychologically, she embodied the scorned devotee, her unrequited passion a potent elixir for vengeance. A handkerchief scented with almond extract, innocent bitters or arsenic's mimic, added physical intrigue. Yet her alibi wavered. Footsteps heard near the conservatory at 11 suggested post-mortem intrusion. I sought to declare my heart, found him lifeless. Tears cascaded, truth or theatricality. Dr. Thorne received Poirot in the library, amid tomes of arcane medical lore. The physician's portly frame quivered, his spectacles slipping upon a sweat-sheened nose. "Blackmail, monsieur! Harrington held evidence of a surgical folly, a life lost through my error. He demanded discretion regarding his own ailments." Thorne's psyche was a cauldron of ethical torment. Desperation might have prescribed a fatal cure. A book on toxicology, bookmarked at arsenic's properties, lay open. Coincidence or clue? The missing vial from his bag loomed large, its contents potentially adulterated. Timeline fractures. Thorne claimed library seclusion, yet a servant spied him near the decanters. Red herring of professional negligence? Mrs. Beatrice Lang confronted Poirot in the kitchens, her domain of copper pots and herb-scented air. Stout and unyielding, she chopped vegetables with vehement strokes, her blue eyes flashing. "That tyrant destroyed my brother. Unjust sacking led to his ruin, his end by his own hand. Vengeance? Aye, it simmers, but I'd not poison the well I tend." Her psychological profile revealed a forge of familial loyalty. Resentment hammered into resolve. Proximity to the brandy afforded opportunity. Traces of arsenic in the rat bait confirmed access. Yet her alibi held firm. Staff attested to her presence. A torn apron thread matching the conservatory scrap. Misdirection, perhaps planted. Finally, Colonel Hale in the smoking room, puffing his pipe amid haze, his limp accentuated as he rose. "Debts, Poirot, mounting from wages with Archie. He demanded repayment, honour at stake." The veteran's psyche warred between camaraderie and ruin. Forgiveness in the will nullified motive. Yet whispers of forgery arose. Footprints matching his boots circled the scene. Inspection, he claimed. Psychological strain evident in his gruff evasion. As twilight encroached, clues coalesced. The poisoned decanter, tampered son's fingerprints, gloves employed. Timeline anomalies. Lady Evelyn's maid heard whispers at 10:30, implicating collusion. The charred letter hinted at collective secrets. Red herrings abounded. Victor's chit, Voss's, handkerchief Thorne's book. diverting from the core. Poirot retreated to meditate, the frost's whispers echoing the Manor's concealed truths. The mosaic neared completion, yet shadows lingered, the killer's identity veiled in the gathering dusk. Chapter 4. The icy veil lifts. As the veil of twilight descended upon Harrington Manor, the relentless snowstorm began to wane, its fury spent like a tempestuous passion that had exhausted itself in the night. The 16th of December drew to a close in the year 1932, and the estate, though still ensnared in a blanket of white, now permitted faint glimpses of the world beyond, the skeletal silhouettes of distant trees piercing the gloaming, the muffled hush of settling drifts. Within the Manor's confines, however, the atmosphere thickened with an intangible pall, the lamps kindled in sconces and chandeliers, casting elongated shadows that writhed across the walls like accusing fingers. The air, redolent with the scents of beeswax and smouldering peat, carried an undercurrent of unease, as if the very stones whispered of the arsenic-laced demise that had befallen Lord Archibald Harrington. The conservatory's glass enclosure, fogged and spectral, stood as a silent sentinel to the crime, its exotic verdure now tainted by the memory of death's contorted embrace. Hercule Poirot, sensing the inexorable approach of revelation, moved through the corridors with the purposeful stride of a conductor, leading his orchestra toward crescendo. His moustaches, impeccably groomed despite the ordeal, twitched with the thrill of the chase, his emerald eyes alight with the fire of deduction. Poirot's intellect, that unparalleled forge of logic, hammered at the anomalies that had emerged thus far. The poisoned decanter, the discrepant footprints, the charred fragments of intrigue. He comprehended that the human psyche, in its labyrinthine complexity, often concealed truths behind veils of misdirection, red herrings strewn like breadcrumbs to lead the unwary astray. With the household's permission, granted under duress of circumstance, he embarked upon a methodical search of the private quarters, his compact form slipping into chambers like a shadow seeking substance. Commencing with Dr. Reginald Thorne's guest suite, a modest room furnished with medical tomes and apothecary vials, Poirot's scrutiny yielded immediate fruit. Amid the clutter of the bedside table lay a volume entitled Treatises on Toxicology, its spine cracked from frequent consultation. Flipping to the bookmarked page, Poirot's gaze fell upon an exhaustive discourse on arsenic, its symptoms, its stealthy administration, its mimicry of natural ailments such as cardiac failure. "Ah, mon ami," Poirot murmured to the empty air, "you study the serpent's venom with undue fascination." Psychologically, this discovery illuminated Thorne's tormented soul. A healer ensnared by his own fallibility, perhaps driven to wield knowledge as a weapon against his blackmailer. Yet, was this evidence damning, or a scholarly pursuit misconstrued as malice? A red herring, perchance, planted by another to implicate the physician. Proceeding to Mrs. Beatrice Lang's domain in the servants' wing, a Spartan pantry adjoining the kitchens, Poirot uncovered further physical clues amid the shelves of preserves and spices. A tin of rat bait, its lid askew, bore the unmistakable label of arsenical compound, grains of the white powder scattered as if in haste. "Accessible to all who traverse these halls," Poirot noted, his fingers gloved to preserve integrity. Mrs. Lang's psychological profile deepened in this light. Her vendetta, a smouldering ember fanned by years of grievance, afforded both motive and means. Yet the bait's ubiquity diluted suspicion. Any hand could have pilfered the toxin under cover of routine. A clever misdirection, designed to scatter blame like the snowflakes without. In Lady Evelyn Harrington's boudoir, a sanctuary of lace and lavender, Poirot's search revealed a leather-bound diary concealed within a secretaire. The entries, penned in an elegant script, chronicled a litany of marital discontents, Archibald's tyrannies, her clandestine affections for Colonel Hale, and veiled musings on liberation through drastic measures. He suspects my heart's wanderings, divorce looms, with penury its shadow, one passage lamented. Psychologically, Lady Evelyn emerged as a woman of suppressed fire, her refined exterior masking vengeful plots that bordered on the theatrical. Were these words mere catharsis, or blueprints for murder? The emerald fabric scrap from the conservatory, initially linked to her gown, upon closer inspection matched a torn curtain hem, planted, perhaps, to weave her into the web of guilt. A masterful red herring, diverting from truer culprits. Victor's chambers, a dishevelled lair of discarded cravats and betting slips, yielded a cache of hidden correspondence, desperate pleas for loans from shadowy creditors, each missive underscoring his financial abyss. "Father's parsimony drives me to ruin," one letter beseeched. Poirot's insight pierced the young man's psyche. Entitlement warped into desperation, inheritance a lifeline severed by paternal decree. The gambling chit near the body? Likely slipped from his pocket in haste, or deliberately placed to incite suspicion. Timeline inconsistencies gnawed. Victor's billiard solitude contradicted by a servant's glimpse of him in the hall at 10:45. A breakthrough materialized in the stables, where the snow's partial melt revealed footprints leading from the manor's rear egress, broad treads matching Colonel Hale's boots. Their pattern etched in the slush. Confronting the veteran in the smoking room, amid the haze of pipe tobacco, Poirot pressed, "You ventured without, Colonel, despite the gale's fury." Hale's ruddy features flushed deeper. Merely inspecting the horses, fretted for their warmth. Yet the timeline faltered. The prince, time-stamped by fresh fall, placed him abroad post-dinner, proximate to the conservatory's side entrance. Psychologically, Hale's honour-bound facade cracked under scrutiny, debts transforming loyalty into lethal expediency. Red herring or revelation? Miss Elena Voss's study desk harboured a torn love letter, fragments reassembled to declare undying devotion to the Lord, discarded, perhaps, in rejection's wake. Interrogating her anew, Poirot's gentle accusation pierced, "You prevaricate, mademoiselle. Witnesses place you near the conservatory at 11, post-mortem." She faltered, her hazel eyes welling. "I confess, I sought to bare my soul, to plead for his regard. Entering, I found him, lifeless, his form crumpled amid the ferns." Her sobs rang authentic, yet Poirot pondered. Truth, or a feint to obscure tampering? Her psychological torment, love scorned, remained a potent motive, intertwined with the almond-scented handkerchief, mimic of arsenic's trace. Confrontations escalated as evening deepened, the manor's lamps flickering like uneasy consciences. In the drawing-room, Poirot assembled fragments before the suspects, his voice a symphony of insinuation. "The veils lift, mes amis. Motives entwine like ivy. Pecuniary gain for Victor and Lady Evelyn, whose fortunes hinged upon the Lord's demise. Vengeance for Mrs. Lang and Dr. Thorne. Wounds festered by injustice and blackmail. Passion's sting for Miss Voss. Honour's ruin for Colonel Hale." Accusations flew. Victor denounced Thorne's expertise. Lang accused Lady Evelyn's duplicity. Yet Poirot discerned the orchestration of discord, red herrings proliferating to cloak the singular truth. A pivotal anomaly surfaced. the decanter's stopper, bearing no prints but a smudge of glove leather, indicating premeditation. Timeline refined. Death at precisely 10:45, per rigor's onset, fracturing alibis anew. Lady Evelyn's migraine, feigned perhaps to afford solitude for scheming. Thorn's tonic, potentially the vector, laced surreptitiously. As the clock struck 9, Poirot retreated to the library, the storm's residual howls mirroring the turmoil within his grey cells. The mosaic coalesced, clues physical and psychological aligning. Yet one shadow lingered, the killer's identity hovering like frost on the pane. The icy veil lifted incrementally, revealing not merely deeds, but the dark recesses of the human heart. Tomorrow's dawn would bring the denouement, justice's chill light piercing the remnants of deception. Chapter 5. The Revelation of the Grey Cells. The evening of the 16th of December, 1932, cloaked Harrington Manor in a shroud of deepening indigo. The remnants of the blizzard now a mere whisper against the frost-encrusted panes. The storm had at last subsided, leaving the estate in a crystalline hush, as if nature herself held her breath in anticipation of the truths to be unveiled. Within the drawing-room, the heart of the manor's genteel facade, a roaring fire cast its amber glow upon the assembled company, illuminating faces etched with the strains of suspicion and the pallor of unspoken dread. The air was thick with the scents of polished oak, smouldering logs, and the faint, pervasive chill that seeped through even the stoutest walls. A reminder that death's icy grasp lingered amid the living. Hercule Poirot, the architect of this impending denouement, had summoned the household once more, his directive delivered with the unyielding authority of one who wielded logic as a rapier. The suspects convened in a semicircle of high-backed chairs, their postures a tableau of psychological revelation. Lady Evelyn Harrington, her lithe form rigid in mourning silks, her grey eyes veiled by a veneer of composure that masked inner turmoil. Victor Harrington, slouched with affected nonchalance, his auburn locks dishevelled, his pale gaze darting like a trapped animal's. Miss Elena Voss, perched on the edge of her seat, her hazel eyes magnified by spectacles, her delicate hands clasped in a knot of anxiety. Dr. Reginald Thorne, his portly frame seeming shrunken, his ruddy cheeks ashen, his spectacles perched precariously as if ready to flee. Mrs. Beatrice Lang, stout and unyielding, her arms crossed defiantly over her black attire, her blue eyes flashing with wary defiance. And Colonel Marcus Hale, leaning on his cane, his grizzled moustache twitching, his military bearing compromised by the weight of scrutiny. Poirot positioned himself at the room's focal point, before the mantelpiece where a clock ticked inexorably, marking the passage from deception to disclosure. His compact stature belied the commanding presence he exuded, his moustaches curling with Gallic precision, his emerald eyes sweeping the assembly like a searchlight-piercing fog. "Mes chers amis," he commenced, his voice a measured cadence resonant with Belgian inflection. "We have traversed the shadows of this frozen enigma, where the blizzard without mirrors the tempests within the human soul. Lord Archibald Harrington lies cold in death's embrace, felled by arsenic, a poison insidious, administered in his brandy with calculation most precise. The hour of revelation has arrived. The little grey cells of Hercule Poirot have aligned the mosaic of clues, piercing the veils of misdirection to expose the culprit who walks among us." A collective intake of breath rippled through the room, the fire's crackle underscoring the tension like a dramatic overture. Poirot paced deliberately, his steps measured, each word a chisel chipping at the edifice of falsehood. Consider, if you will, the physical evidence. The decanter tampered, its contents laced with arsenic pilfered from the rat bait in Mrs. Lang's pantry. Accessible, yes, but wielded by a hand versed in subtlety. The shattered glass, exhaling the almond scent detectable only to the attuned nose. Footprints in the conservatory's frost, erratic, overlapping, suggesting not haste but deliberation. A lingerer who observed the agony's throes. The scrap of emerald fabric, initially implicating Lady Evelyn, yet upon scrutiny matching a curtain hem, planted, a red herring to divert suspicion. Lady Evelyn's hand fluttered to her throat, her composure fracturing. "Then I am exonerated," she queried, her voice a silken thread frayed by hope. Poirot inclined his head. "Patience, madame. We delve deeper into the psychological labyrinth. Motives abound like weeds in an untended garden. For you, liberation from a union of convenience shadowed by divorce and destitution. Your liaison with Colonel Hale, a spark to the powder keg. For young Victor, the threat of disinheritance, your profligacies a noose tightening about your neck, debts mounting, the gambling chit near the body, a clumsy feint, perhaps self-incriminating, or sown by another." Victor bristled, his sneer resurfacing. "Preposterous! I'd not risk the gallows for a fortune soon mine." "Ah, but was it?" Poirot countered, his gaze piercing. "The will's alteration, hidden in your chambers, revealed your desperation. Yet timelines absolve you partially. A servant's testimony places you in the hall, but not at the fatal moment." Miss Voss interjected, her voice quavering. "And I? My affection spurned. Does that brand me murderess?" Poirot's expression softened momentarily. "Mademoiselle, your passion unrequited is a torment profound. Your handkerchief scented with almond, a coincidence poignant. Your footsteps at 11 bespeak discovery, not deed. Love wounds, but seldom slays in such calculated fashion." Mrs. Lang snorted derisively. "Then turn your gaze elsewhere, detective. My grudge festers true, my brother's ruin at Harrington's hand, but I'd not poison the master I served faithfully." "Faithfully?" Poirot echoed, his moustaches twitching. "Your proximity to the decanters afforded opportunity, your vendetta a motive searing. Yet the Bates traces on your apron suggest routine, not malice. A red herring, perhaps, but not the core." Colonel Hale cleared his throat gruffly. "What of me, Poirot? Debts to Archie. Honour demands settlement, but murder? I'd face ruin ere stoop to that." "Your footprints in the snow, Colonel, circling the conservatory. Inspection, you claim. Yet the pattern whispers of surveillance. Your psyche, bound by codes martial, wars with desperation. Forgiveness in the will nullifies gain, unless forgery lurks." The assembly shifted uneasily, accusations unspoken hanging like icicles poised to fall. Poirot halted his pacing, his voice rising in timbre. "Now, the inconsistencies temporale. Death at 10:45, rigor's grip confirming. Alibis crumble. Lady Evelyn's migraine uncorroborated beyond her maid's word. Victor's billiard solitude pierced by echoes. Miss Voss's study vigil interrupted. Mrs. Lang's kitchen toils attested, yet gaps persist. Colonel Hale's stable venture timed suspiciously. Dr. Thorne mopped his brow, his voice unsteady. "And I, monsieur, my tomes on toxicology, mere scholarship." Poirot wheeled upon him, his emerald eyes ablaze. "Ah, Dr. Thorne, herein lies the crux. Your psyche, burdened by blackmail, Harrington's knowledge of your surgical folly, a life extinguished by error, compelled servitude. You tended his heart's frailty, prescribing tonics that masked a cumulative poison. The missing vial from your bag laced with arsenic, administered progressively, culminating in the fatal draft. Your book, bookmarked at Arsenic's mimicry of cardiac arrest. No autopsy needed in this isolation. The storm your ally. Thorne's jowls quivered, his spectacles fogging. Lies! I'd not— Mais non! Poirot interjected. The footprints, yours, size and tread matching, circling to observe efficacy. The decanter tampered post-dinner, gloved hands leaving smudges of leather from your medical case. The charred letter fragment, your plea for mercy, burned in haste. Psychologically, you embody the healer corrupted, ethics eroded by fear. Motives converge upon you. Revenge for blackmail. Preservation of reputation. The others, red herrings, fabric planted, chit dropped, diversions you orchestrated, knowing suspicions would scatter. The room erupted in gasps. Thorne collapsed into his chair, sobbing. He ruined me! Years of torment! Mercy, I beg! Poirot's expression held no triumph, only solemnity. Justice, monsieur, not mercy. The grey cell's triumph, unveiling the truth buried in frost. As constables, summoned by telegram ere the storm's peak, arrived through the thawing paths, the manor exhaled its held breath. Lady Evelyn wept in relief. Victor pondered his inheritance soberly. Miss Voss found solace in closure. Mrs. Lang nodded grimly. Colonel Hale saluted the revelation. The frozen veil shattered, the manor's secrets laid bare under the stars emerging in the cleared sky. Thus concluded the enigma of Harrington Manor, a testament to the indomitable power of deduction amid the tempests of the human heart.